pass it over to Judge Tracey Lord now. So she's here to present about the why, the how, and the impact of the Winnipeg Drug Treatment Court and the barriers and challenges and successes and best practice recommendations. The Honorable Chief Justice Tracey Lord received her Bachelor of Law degree from the University of Manitoba in 1991, and thereafter practiced as the Crown with the Manitoba Justice Prosecutions Divisions. In 2000, she joined the Criminal Organization Unit, specializing in gang prosecutions and homicides between 2005 and 2007, supervised the unit. In 2007, she became director of the Specialized Prosecutions and Appeals until her appointment to the Provincial Court of Manitoba in 2008. Judge Lord was appointed to the Associate Chief in 2019, is enjoying the challenges involved in the administration of the Provincial Court. So I'm happy to pass it over to Judge Lord and thank her for her time. And it's a slightly shorter presentation, but we're eager to learn more. Over to you, Justin.
Okay, can you hear me all right?
We can.
Okay, well, good morning from Manitoba. Thank you very much for asking me to participate. I was able to pop in and out of some of the presentations yesterday and have been with you this morning so far, and it's been terrific to hear from colleagues across the country about the important work they're doing in both drug treatment capacity and wellness in general. So thank you for inviting me to participate. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation to share, so I'm just going to go off some notes I've prepared to tell you about Winnipeg Drug Treatment Court. And my comments this morning will be centered exclusively on Winnipeg Drug Treatment Court, but I did just want to mention that we have also established a second drug treatment court in Manitoba that sits in Brandon, which is our next largest urban center after Winnipeg, and it serves the western region of the province. And that's been up and running for 2 or 3 years now, and is on a bit of a smaller scale than Winnipeg, but is certainly using the same principles, approach, and structure. So what I'm saying about Winnipeg is also going to apply to that court as well. So I'm going to start with just a brief background of the Winnipeg Drug Treatment Court. Then I'm going to move on to discuss our most recent evaluation report, which addresses what we know to be successes at this point, and which also makes recommendations for us in terms of some challenges we have moving forward. Our court in Winnipeg started sitting in January of 2006. It is an entirely federally funded court. There is some in-kind contributions from the provincial government. One example of that would be the office space that the program operates out of is in a provincial justice building. But the actual dollars are coming from the federal government. Just briefly, our governance structure: we have an oversight committee, which is chaired by the chief judge and comprised of the judges that regularly sit in drug treatment court, along with representatives from both Crown's offices, duty council, the Defense Lawyers Association, policing agencies, and other community partners. This committee has the central decision-making power and role for the direction of the court. So for instance, the decision to expand into the West Man region and sit in Brandon would be the kind of decision that is made by the oversight committee. We also have an operations committee, which is comprised of the judges who sit in drug treatment court and the lawyers who regularly appear there, as well as the staff of the program. And that committee meets more regularly than the oversight committee and deals with the day-to-day running of the program and the day-to-day running of the court. So our court has been consistently evaluated. It was done annually between 2009 and 2015. And that evaluation is done by the Justice Research Institute, which is part of the Department of Criminal Justice at the University of Winnipeg. And it's been a consistent group doing the evaluation since the start. So that's been very helpful because they have all of the history and continuity from the start of the court. These evaluations are available on our court's website, so they're publicly accessible. So again, annual reports between 2009 and 2015. Our next evaluation after that was not completed until 2022 for a couple of reasons, and it dealt with the years 2015 to 2021. So what happened in 2015 is that some major changes happened in drug treatment court, and it affected the funding model of the court and how the court was staffed. So there was a real major shift in 2015, which I'm going to talk about in more detail because I think it's affected the positive outcomes we're seeing. So prior to 2015, our federal funding went directly to the Addictions Foundation of Manitoba, who administered the program basically in its entirety, subject to the oversight committee. Their addiction counselors essentially filled the role of both therapist and case manager. And in many situations, the case management function that they were required to fill included having to do compliance aspects of the program. So urine analysis, curfew checks, and decisions being made about rewards and sanctions to be given to the participants. So at times the role was very blurry for them, and the duality of the role in some cases damaged sort of that trust between the participant and the therapist aspect of the program. And then that necessitated a change in counselor mid-program. So that for some participants and certainly for the staff was a difficult scenario to maneuver through and definitely caused some problems. So in 2015, the government of Manitoba agreed to accept the federal funding directly into essentially the justice budget and administer the funds and run the program. So what happened at that point then is we took the opportunity to look at our staffing model, and we adjusted it to have very separate therapeutic and case management roles performed by different people. So now the therapeutic role is contracted out to the Addictions Foundation of Manitoba, which goes by a different name now, but it's essentially the same agency. And the case managers, and that function is now performed by individuals who are employed by the Justice Department. They fall under that umbrella. So very separate. The therapists strictly provide the one-on-one therapy and group therapy, while the case managers also participate in some aspects of the therapy, but their focus is on all the other necessary issues that need to be addressed, like housing, employment, education, and compliance with the program requirements, which includes the decision-making about sanctions and rewards. So those two roles, we've now separated them. And I think it's working much better for both the staff and the participants. It's been a beneficial change. So while that staffing model changed quite significantly, the structure of the program remained the same. We still have maintained a 4-phase structure. The first phase is the orientation stage, which is about a month long. And at the end of that orientation phase, the participant decides whether to either opt in or opt out of the program. Next is the stabilization phase, which is approximately 4 months long. And the focus of that, the emphasis of that phase is on program participation, establishing safe and stable housing, and establishing community supports. This is followed by what we call the intensive phase, which is again roughly a 4-month period in which the focus is on maintaining employment, or focuses on employment, training, education, and the real treatment component of the program. The final stage is the maintenance stage, which is focused also 4 months long approximately, and focuses on maintaining the new lifestyle and requires abstinence for 4 consecutive months. To graduate from the program, You have to either be employed, enrolled in training or education, have the 4 months of sobriety that I just mentioned, and no program violations for 8 months. We also, I wanted to mention just before I move outside of the program a little bit, we also have an important relationship that we've established with community corrections. We have a small group of dedicated probation officers that support the participants while they're actually in the program, and then support and supervise them post-sentencing. So there's continuity with probation throughout. So there's not that sort of hard shift from having a therapist, case manager, and then a shift to a probation officer. So now you have some context about how our program operates. And so I'll give you a bit of an idea now about our current participant demographic and how the outcomes under the new model that I've described since 2015 compare with the outcomes under the previous model. So at any given time, we have an average of about 20 participants in the program in Winnipeg. We generally have a fairly long list of applicants waiting to be screened and approved for entry into the program. Our current demographic leans towards single males, about 61%, with an average participant age of 30. 2/3 of our participants are unemployed upon entry into the program, and about half of them have actually had no previous criminal involvement until the offense that brings them into the program. Drugs of choice we're seeing currently is predominantly crystal meth, cocaine, and opioids, and increasingly fentanyl, which is a challenge for sure. Most of our participants are found to have high needs and be high risk on the risk management tool used to evaluate them on entry into the program. But, you know, it's acknowledged that that's primarily due to their addiction as opposed to other things. Most are facing a lengthy period of provincial jail if they were not to go through the program, and most commonly for trafficking offenses. Most of our participants have also suffered some significant past trauma, which has not been addressed and which has ultimately led to their addiction issues. The average time spent in drug treatment court is between 12 and 18 months. So, you know, if you're at that 18-month point, it's been a long commitment and a rigorous program that you've faced as opposed to a jail sentence. So just some stats now from our most recent evaluation. Our graduation rate is 37%, which is up from 34% in the pre-2015 evaluations. It doesn't seem like a significant increase, but when you look at the small number of people we're dealing with, it actually is quite a significant increase. Between 2015 and 2021, so for a 2-year period following graduation, none of our graduates have reoffended in any way. So we're super proud of that. Previously, there was a modest reoffending rate of about 14% of the grads. So again, that's a significant improvement in terms of recidivism. And even of those who were discharged between 2015 and 2021, only 19% reoffended as compared to 46% pre-2015 under that old model. So can I say that the change in model has resulted in those numbers? I can't give that correlation, but we certainly think that that's contributed to a really positive program delivery model for our participants. The evaluation also attempted a cost benefit analysis for the time frame 2015 to 21. And in terms of criminal justice costs, so that would be a comparison per diem of the cost to keep someone incarcerated versus the per diem cost of treating someone within the program and in the community. the number is over $16 million. So again, a significant actual dollar figure. Much harder to put a number, obviously, on the social welfare benefits of the program, but I think we can see those would obviously also be reduced, as well as just the direct costs of the Commission of Crime itself. So it's hard to quantify that, but I think it's clear that people who are employed and are not collecting social assistance or other assistance in terms of unemployment benefits, they're consumers, they're paying taxes, people who can take care of their own children, reduce the costs of children being in care, people who are physically and mentally and emotionally healthy require less health care, further reduce risks in the community for ambulance attendants and hospital stays. So all very positive outcomes that we can see. I see I only have about 5 minutes, so I'm just going to quickly comment on the participant aspect of the evaluation. So they also do a survey of current participants, past grads, and even those who have been discharged. The overall rating from them of the program is quite positive. They all reported better emotional, mental, and physical health as a result of their participation in the program, even if they didn't complete it. There were two common themes that were negative that the participants raised. One was high staff turnover, and the other was a perception of inconsistent treatment in terms of the length of time people were in the program. And so the report made 5 recommendations, and those two aspects are included in them. So I'm just going to quickly give you the recommendations, and then hopefully there'll be a couple minutes for questions if there are any. Okay, the first recommendation was to increase referrals from the Provincial Crown, which they've undertaken to take a look at and do. Second recommendation was to establish permanent positions rather than term positions to decrease staff turnover. Third recommendation was to keep the time in the program to a 12-month limit, as long as all the program requirements have been met. The fourth one was for those who are coming into the program, having already done significant programming or treatment, allow them to enter at not at the beginning of the program, but to meet them where they're at. And then the fifth recommendation was a review of the criteria for sanctions and rewards within the program. So we're going to take those 5 things and focus on that moving forward, and hope to even have a more successful program going forward. So that's my quick little wrap up there. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I see one question has come up. It just says from Lindsay, just saying, I'm curious about the difference between your role, between the role your probation officers play in comparison to the case managers. As a PPO in Ontario, who is working with our local drug treatment court, this is a role we've been trying to work out.
So the case management role would clearly be a more hands-on, intensive participation. I know the probation officer does a risk assessment when the person comes into the program using their corrections risk assessment tool. And then that is repeated at the end of the program to evaluate the reduction in risk the person poses and to prepare for their probation experience. They are a regular face around the program though, so that there's familiarity with the probation officer throughout, and then integration right into the community sentence. So there is certainly a differentiation between the roles, and the case management role is far more intensive, but it is a support that's there as well.
Great. And it looks like we might have time for those. I'm going to try to do this properly. We have a hand's been raised. So C Shafe 4, I think you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
You okay? Well, you didn't hear me, did you?
Yeah, we can kind of hear you.
Sorry, that was unintentional. I apologize.
Oh, okay, no problem. Okay, well, that brings us actually more or less right to time. Judge Lord, I'm not sure if you have any last closing comments before we wrap up for our break.
No, I just thank you again for asking me to participate, and I've certainly learned a lot from the presentations that I've heard so far, and I hope we can take away something from our experience in Manitoba.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your insights and participating in today's talk. Lots of really interesting information certainly happening in Manitoba as well as across the country. So a lot for us to absorb. And thank you again, Judge Lord, for your time today. So we are going to take a brief 15-minute nutrition break. So if you need to grab a coffee, we'll be back at 11:05. And we'll continue our day. So thank you so much for everyone's participation. Thank you to all the panelists, and we'll see you in about 15 minutes.